Okay, let's start. As I mentioned earlier, we have one panelist less, as Deborah Sant fell ill yesterday, so she couldn't come. But I think we can still keep the panel as we wished to keep it, and including education and participation, or another name for participation, and try to discuss also the bridge between those two. Susanne and Fabienne just came straight out of a completely different world. You arrived at 6 o'clock this morning from Lagos, and you Addis Abeba, yeah, and you are coming back from a trip to Moscow with a short intermission at your office yesterday, and I just cannot imagine the skills you have to come from these different worlds, arrive here, give your lectures, go into the mood of a panel discussion, and I think this is probably the easy part, rather than going the other way and then meeting a bunch of school children in Berlin and being involved in a vibrant discussion, or going back to Lagos in chaos situations, maybe, possibly, and with all your luggage, I mean mental luggage as well. So our first question would be, how do you get into the mood of going to these processes? Is that easy? Is that seriously a skill you need? You two first. Is that something you have to get trained?
Okay, I start. Fine. Well, I really love to delve into these different worlds, and I think doing the workshops and meeting these different people are really the great fun of my profession. For me, it's much harder to be in Berlin and trying to still convince after we are 15 years working in a participatory way with our users, still trying to convince them to work actually with the users. Now we're doing, for example, a building for young people, also ein Jugendzentrum, and for me, of course, I have to talk to these young people. And we start the project and they tell us, you're not allowed to speak to the user. And so actually being in this user world is always fantastic. And I really love to get the feeling for these different moods and trying to understand how we best get together and work together.
How's it for you?
Well, I just love it, so I don't think it needs anything than just, it's just my interest and my passion. So.
But you have, you work in Berlin, for example, you're doing these kindergarten schools, etc. But you work in a completely different cultural situation, language barriers, etc. You made these toolboxes, if you like, the games, etc., to be able to get the knowledge out of your user, of your future users. Do you have a toolbox like that as well? Do you develop something, or is it a method you start developing, or which could evolve from project to project?
No method at all. I think our method is that we don't have one, and you just throw yourself into it. And my method is, of course, the design. At the end of the day, I still, have to come up with something, or we, rather. And I'm very skeptical and critical of methods in participatory whatsoever, because it's against the idea of participation. If you want to do a collaborative whatever, you just do it. So you don't need a method. And that's, of course, against, no, I see, this is against, I'm more into the urban scale, and planners love to control. And I'm rather interested in the question, what you have to steer and what you can steer, especially in environments, as I said, in Lagos, for instance, or now in Ethiopia, in Addis, exactly. It's rather the question how the urban designer can participate in the urban development, that's a super interesting question. So that's, you know, so I just throw myself into it and then we see where we go.
And you get an invitation from through NGOs, or how do you enter the situation?
Yeah, it's you know how it is. You know, you're in these conferences, you meet people. With Verena, I was in an Africa sort of symposium in Berlin. I don't know, 16 months ago. Yeah, exactly. So then you meet people, and then you learn the work of the others. You get invitations, you get engaged, and since my personality is rather outgoing, so you know, you connect, and then you start the project, and then you see.
So that's like initiating your project through invitations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's this sort of exact.
And do you get commissions? I mean, is it more like, say, an area or a government will come towards you, say, we have a problem, this and this school doesn't really, could meet some improvement. So do you still get like the Hawaii commissions?
Yes, also somehow we are a very traditional architectural office. We just developed a whole set of tools to work actually with the people. And I guess that's the main difference. We can't just delve into some worlds, but we have to come up with some quick results, and we try to give the people the chance to understand their needs and desires. And for that we experience that we do really need kind of workshops, and that planning game is now quite a new tool, which is already translated also in Chinese, which is quite interesting. To develop it also for different cultural contexts. And that's the extra bit, which we also commission to, but the people come to us.
Mm-hmm. One could argue that participation or the methods you're using is like a phase zero before the actual planning process starts. And this is actually not visible or accountable at the pay part of the architectural tradition. So the Hawaii wouldn't pay you for that initial phase.
Yes, but I think there is now the awareness that this takes quite a lot of brain and time, so it's well paid.
So that is changing.
That is changing. What is really still hard to convince the authorities to understand how important the knowledge of the people is. Mm-hmm. This user knowledge of the place and of the own needs of these people.
That's probably something you experience as well, that you are working with experts. They're very poor experts, but they know exactly what they need, probably. Would you say that this expertise is something that is valued in our profession? I mean, also from an architectural point of view, but also, say, in the teaching environment. Is that something that is valued, that sort of goes back into universities, that we're going to teach these skills, expertise? Both of you?
Okay. So I try to answer your question. So as we also work with clients quite closely in our office work. So we did a few co-housing projects in Berlin where we really, in a very close way, worked with still working with the future users. I think, for example, in my personal case, it has an influence on my teaching because I take the students serious. That's a very simple thing. I take them serious. They have knowledge, I have knowledge, and how can we share this knowledge? Of course, I'm responsible for structuring a certain process. Maybe also I have to tell them that in the end we need results, even if it is a question. But for me it's very interesting that I have absolutely not the feeling that I should teach them something that I know and they don't. That makes a difference.
Yeah, you told me yesterday that...
Yeah, and this is very interesting because also within our office work, we feel that we are responsible for proposing, for giving the idea of alternatives, for structuring the process. And I think we're quite dominant doing this. We are dominant, I think. But we take them serious. And that's something interesting, I think. I don't know if in the end it changes architecture. That I'm not sure about it. But
you all are teaching, so maybe same subject. So do you think that it is valued and it will be included in architecture or urban planning teaching in the universities? Do you think that is? Yes, I know. But is it valued as an expertise? I mean, you say you develop these toolboxes, you are against toolboxes. So there are obviously different approaches to participation and how you deal with it. But if once you try to teach it, you need some sort of script for teaching participation. So what would be your script? How do you transfer the knowledge?
Yeah, that's an interesting question indeed. Especially as we do, I mean, how I teach in groups only. They always work in groups on one big project. We did a studio on Lagos last semester, and this was extremely challenging for the students because it was like, you know, another context. They had no idea of urban design, even though I think a city like Lagos is probably an excellent laboratory to understand what you have to steer and what you don't have to steer, and that's what I try to teach them. So not to control everything, but the opposite is true, just open these spaces and enable these developments. So we had guests from Nigeria, so I tried to sort of stimulate reality by inviting, for instance, Nigerian planners to Stuttgart, and then they would criticize them or give their feedback. So it's about a stimulation of reality, and that's even more complicated in urban design because it's extremely complex what you have to control, what you have to understand, and many things you cannot understand, but you still have to try. I don't know, it's also here it's an experiment, so I try to, I mean, we do quite complex preparation of the studios, I have to admit, which is sort of urban design in itself, so you try to sort of do a framework, what's the framework exactly, what they have to deliver, as Verena said, because in the end we want results, and I'm a sort of fresh professor, so I'm probably more ambitious than my colleagues who are sort of maybe laid back. And then and then you always travel, you know, we went to Lagos, they would present, we would do a workshop with young professionals. It was a lot of pressure. Yeah, so I don't know whether I answered your question at all, but
yeah, you did know. I mean, you said something, you said semi-instructive. Your methods are sort of give semi-instructions. And you use the games, and I think you did answer my question.
Yeah, but in the teaching, I would like to add something for the teaching. There we don't really use the toolboxes, and I don't really think you can teach participation, but what we try to do is to raise awareness of participation, and that the knowledge of the people is a really important social robust resource, as Helga Nowotny said. And I would also agree what you said. We also try to simulate this kind of reality by getting authorities into the university, or we brought kids into university to criticize the work of the students, and yeah, to give them that awareness.
And you too work in different scales. I think that's a huge difference. I mean, you make buildings and you work in an urban scale, and that is not comparable or not controllable in the same way. Just one word, you said our kindergarten in your lecture. And I thought our kindergarten means not only the kindergarten who we built, but also it's an identification for all participants. And I think that is something that makes these projects so strong, because it is not only once built and then you leave it, and as an architect you would present the kindergarten. It's not my kindergarten I'm presenting, because I'm not the child who's going to this kindergarten. So these processes, they define a language talking about them that are inclusive already, and they are sort of, say, have an impact into the future of these buildings. And I think that is quite a strength that should maybe be communicated as well. How do you feel about this? Is that something you have to explicitly say, or is it something that just happens to be like this? Do you communicate this in a special way?
Yes, we do. I mean, this is very specific about our work, since we're in an extremely existing environment. So it's really crowded usually where we intervene. And people have to be part of the process from the beginning on, because if they're not, I'm not going to do anything. That's what I tried to show with the first image, with this bulldozer in this little alley. So even if I have the greatest ideas, which I would doubt, but even if, there is no way of doing anything. So this is just comes naturally, and you have to come up with things people are willing to manage and can manage. And most of that sort of projects I do fail, because people do not think of the operation and the maintenance. That is, even already getting it done is really a struggle. But then to keep it, to make it run and to keep it running is even more difficult. I mean, now thinking of the biogas sort of thing, they are now, the cooperative, they are now learning accounting by a local economist who is teaching them, and they are now in the selection process of the employees. And they selected now 2 women who would run it, and this you have to carefully sort of accompany or coach, and I go back, of course. I mean, I think I would go back to my entire life to this place, because if I don't, it's not going, I guess, you know. So, I mean, it's a machine of little pieces, but you need someone who sort of, I don't know, what's the right, and I don't think I'm the engine, but it's sort of someone who sort of keeps on asking, you know, are you doing this? Have you done this? Have you thought of that? So, yeah.
So it's part of, these projects become part of your biography.
Yeah, exactly. No, absolutely. And it's like knitting. I think knitting is maybe a nice image. You just knit it together, and the hotspot as such was always designed as a sort of an incubator in on many levels, in many senses, and that could also incrementally grow, sort of. There should be several hotspots. We, of course, discussed the program. I mean, it was about infrastructure from the beginning, because if you ask people what you want, they would always approach you, we need toilets. So designing a toilet is, you know, it's not that exciting, even though it's very exciting in a context where you have no black water treatment, like in Lagos. I mean, the whole city has no black water treatment. So it gets, again, very exciting, but then it's the whole process, the whole, how you manage these, is it scalable or not, you know, all these questions. This is why economy comes in quite quickly, and how you fund the first one, and how you fund the operation, and so on and so forth.
Coming back to education as well, when you try to, I mean, you said that you see your students on eye level. So this is already a change in an educational program, because that's not how it used to be. So do you feel that it needs this kind of new programming of the architectural education? And do you see that in other universities as well? Or is it a personal view?
It's an interesting question. I don't really know the old one, because my own studies are so long ago. When I was a teaching and research associate in the 1990s, this is something I still refer to, but we applied a similar thing, so in a way, different, but in a way. So I cannot really compare this to other. The only thing, there are little things. For example, there's always the question, talking about results, you want and you have to document it, you might want to publish it, you want to discuss it, you want, and so on and so on. Are you giving a certain layout to the students so that they fulfill something that has been pre-layouted? And I'm against it. But on the other hand, you need a kind of structure for it. So I'm really looking, together with my team, we are really looking for a kind of idea how we can give them as much freedom, because every project has its representation, and the representation is really important because it's part of the project. But on the other hand, how we can compare the results in the end. So that's something I think is really interesting. And of course there are professors at my school and other schools, and they would always give A1 or A0 sheet, and the name of the professor, the name of the assistants, and the name of the secretary is on the plan, yeah, before there's anything to see. So I don't know. It's not. This is maybe not what I'm interested in, but it's also that it's not that we are not interested in it. But we have to find maybe a new approach to it, or an approach that fits to our approach to content and to criticism and to
but if you have that aim to let's use the word revolutionize. Eh? It's maybe a bit big, but why not? We're talking about Jeanne d'Arc here. Do you think, or do you feel that you get encouraged in these ways? And I would like to span two things together. One is you do changes to schools, so the building itself looks different, but they're going to be taught in the same curriculum, or is that changed as well? Is it just a built environment that is changed, but the content that is taught in school is still the same? And my question would be, how can you think these two together? So the built environment changes, but the curriculum doesn't. Does it still work? Or you want to change the curriculum, but you're still in the same system?
I think there's a huge difference of how you can actually teach. And I do think I teach as I also imagine projects and develop projects with the people. And I think similar to you, I really believe that the students bring important knowledge to school, and that students learn also very well with each other and from each other. And I tried already to do a seminar where I try to encourage the students to do the criticism themselves, and I'm getting back out of it. But unfortunately, in the environment of the Technical University of Berlin, they interpreted it as a weakness of myself, that I wouldn't know how to teach the students, what to tell them, and so on and so on. But I'm totally convinced that you learn by making and by discussing with each other, and it's just amazing. Maybe a student can't really design very well yet, but at the same time, he might be an amazing critic to his fellow students. And so they can learn from each other, and I can enhance it, and I can support them. But I'm first curious to see, okay, what is the interest they have, and where can I support them, instead of standing in front of it. Yeah, that's how you do it.
So in our case, it might be a little bit different. Also, I'm not applying participation to the courses I'm teaching. The only thing is that we decided to have it more open than it used to be. For example, we don't know the results in the beginning. For example, the professor who was on my chair before for 24 years, he would organize the whole course before, and there was a lot of text and all the plans and everything. They would go to Porto or Oslo or so, they would do their housing projects, and then they would come back and have the housing projects. In the end, everyone was happy. And in a way, I think, because it's design and housing, my chair, I really think that even though we are working in my office on this topic, I think it's not so easy to tell others that's the way it should be, because I'm not sure. I only can say this is what I'm doing, but this might not be the only way to do it. So I take them to Berlin, I show them the projects, I take them to the construction site, and then I tell them that we are doing something else at school, because it cannot be the same. And this is why I was so interested in the house am Horn, because it has this kind of double standard of being a house with a garden and a housewife and so on and so on. And then it also serves as a model for something totally different, if we want to see it this way. And this is what I'm really interested in. So my colleagues, I think I have a lot of freedom at the moment because I'm new, so nobody would criticize me. But I have the feeling that maybe, for example, the Tokyo project, we went to some borders, I think, because we did a really big excursion. And we're together for 1 year. This is not the normal way, so people could say, why are you teaching 15 students and bringing them to their thesis, and they have 1 semester more for preparation? So this is why we said the seminar is not the preparation for the studio work, but it's something else. But we stay together, we start sharing ideas, we open our definition of architecture, we travel, and then we see what happens. So we have a discussion that is longer and more ongoing. We can also say it is like this, and 2 weeks later we can say, it could be different. It's not only 1 semester, it's 2, it's a big difference. And the time between the 2 semesters. So we will see. I cannot really say how it is, but I'm challenging myself, because I know that in the end it has to be something interesting that we have as results. Again, results are very important. And the other thing is that because of the Bauhaus year 2019, there is a strong focus now in Weimar. Weimar was the first location for the Bauhaus, then it went to Dessau, and then to Berlin. But of course, in Weimar, everyone is excited about this year, and there's a kind of Anschubfonds Bauhaus 100, and we applied for the workshop we had with our partner university in Tokyo, and we got some money to do this workshop. So we get some support, but it's not a personal support, it's more because we are in the field of something, or the framework. Yeah.
So 100 years of Bauhaus, that was founded at a political situation, or say a societal change before the war, or sort of in between. Do you think that if we say we are again in a cultural turn and in a societal change, do we need new architecture schools, not only teaching methods or programs, other curriculum, but do we need other schools as built schools? And would you, if you design a university, not a kindergarten or an elementary school, would you design a university differently rather than they are designed today? With your experience of,
Well, I think there are some fantastic university spaces, and the other day I was invited in Grenoble to the university, and actually the university was so interacting with the city that there was a city route where anybody would go through the university actually. And that I thought was really amazing. And I thought, yeah, that's why not all universities like that? And I do think, so I couldn't say I would design them differently, but what I do think is extremely important in university that there are spaces where you informally can meet, and like at the AA, you were always at the bar to meet all sorts of people, and other universities really get everybody behind some walls, and you don't have any exchange. And this informal exchange is extremely important for us. And one thing to what you said you wouldn't apply participation. I don't apply participation, but it's a way of, just say a way of life, but it's a way of working together, because we work that way without actually explicitly doing participation, but how I work with the students together, that we appreciate each other, that we get empathy with each other. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about new schools as a kind of a thought or a virtual space, because I think it's not about building new schools. It could be, but it's not the main point from my point of view. I think it's really interesting to think about a different relationship between teaching and research, because it's not everything is about teaching. There's also research, and at most architecture schools, or many German architecture schools, research is separate from teaching. It's related to funding, more to funding than to content, and I think it would be, as it is such an ideal community, a university, such an ideal space, such an ideal collective, it would be really interesting to think about a stronger relationship between research and teaching. And this, I think, the existing curricula are written from a different point of view.
Well, I would say that your studio does research as, like design build projects. It's research on the ground, and this goes back into your university. So I think it is starting already, but not in a sort of academic research field. But there are already opening doors, taking research back into the university and away from the university, back into situations like Lagos. Would you agree?
Yes, but about that approach, I'm very critical again. I don't think that's a very good idea to let students. I mean, it can be interesting, yeah, that these sort of design build projects that you would work with students one semester in something, and then you would go to, preferably an African context, and then implement it there, and then leave again. I no, here I'm very critical. I don't think that's a good idea. But I think what is very interesting, what you said about this thinking, sort of newly thinking this relationship between teaching and researching, because at our school we're an art academy. We're in very heated discussions these days among ourselves, because we exactly, I'm part of the teaching body, especially the newer ones want to go in such a direction to have 1 year long studios and not this sort of stupid semester hacking sort of things. And exactly what you said, that you call it now a seminar, we also have to do it like that, because there is no other sort of thing. Exactly. If we are stuck in this module sort of thing because of this stupid bachelor master, so we try to sort of still keep this bachelor master thing, but sort of go back to the diploma system, so have larger 30 credits units, or how you want to call it, studios. We also even are struggling in how we name it. Some call it units, and I call it rather studio, but it's not important. But it's about this relation between research and design, and also this research-led design approach that I would teach, what comes sort of natural in urban design, because you still need, and that's interesting what both of you said, that you keep it sort of open, and you think the students bring a lot of knowledge. In urban design, this is a bit more challenging, because the students usually have really no idea about, at least in my case, when they come to my studios. but also my experience at ETH, they usually don't know, sometimes they know a bit about city or urbanization, maybe, they even don't know what's the difference, and then about urban design, it's really, they have no clue. So you have to sort of provide that knowledge, that sort of hardcore knowledge transfer in lecture series, what I do like 2 hours a week, and they have to come. Really, it's about knowledge provision, really, but then still they have to be creative and to design, and that's indeed, the question is how you create that in environment, and my preferred model is then what I call the studio, so they have to be in the studio Tuesday and Wednesday whole day, and I want them to be there, they have to be there, and they should work there, because this is how I believe the knowledge is being created in the group, and you talk to each other, and that's what both of you said. You say something, the other does something, it comes back to you, it will change you, you will change, and so on and so forth. So I think we really have to do that, especially at schools where we are teaching. Technical universities, you know, if I'm thinking of ETH also, that might be different, but in our case, at these sort of art universities, it makes no sense at all what we have now.
Yeah, talking back and forth, I would like to open up 2 questions from the audience. We still have a little bit of time. Are there any questions?
Yeah, thank you for these exciting lectures and discussions. I have like one question. I would like to pick up this 100th Jubilee of the Bauhaus, because if you go back 100 years, there were actually no women teaching at the Bauhaus, and I would like to maybe from you here a comparison, you know, if in your career you have encountered some really major difficulties, if you had like difficulties with this like so-called glass ceiling, or if you think that the situation is really changing after these 100 years, and you feel like it's a process of change and it's going to change by itself. Thank you.
Verena, is it for Verena from Beckerath? All of them.
I think I understood your question, but maybe I'm not sure. I don't think it will change by itself, so you really have to do something about it. And I think, you know, I'm half Swiss, half German, and Switzerland is extremely conservative. I think Germany is a bit more advanced in my experience, and what I see in Stuttgart, where I'm teaching, the university and the academy where I'm teaching, they just have now this sort of informal policy. Women are being hired. And this is just how it is. I'm not particularly, let's say, happy about it, because it's reducing someone to gender is also stupid, sort of, but I believe that's the way you have to do it, because otherwise there's no change. I was in my school the first woman, then they hired the second one just right after me. The designers, we have a design department, we have architecture, we have art. The design department, no woman at all. I mean, imagine, it's like 2018 soon, so it's ridiculous. So, no, you really have to apply policies, and then I think the change at some point, maybe in 50 years, we can say, okay, we had now this sort of a policy that 50-50, you know, it has to be 50% women, and then maybe we can release that policy because it's sort of naturally mixed, but I don't believe, no, definitely no.
There's one more question.
I see strong and very intelligent ideas, and I'm amazed about everything I heard. I think we heard a lot of university and teaching, and my point is, how can we transform this in practice? You said I think if you teach, something will change in about 30, 40, 50 years if your students will be architects. Isn't it better to teach the people who are working, for example, in Behörden or in all these old structures, because I worked with one of the ladies who is here and she didn't stop to give me good ideas. I'm in a structure, I have not the right to accept them because we only get money of the state if we do what is already there.
It's a very interesting question, and what I can say now is that I'm a little bit involved now in the IBA Thüringen. This is a Bauausstellung. You might know the idea, the concept of the Bauausstellung. And it's quite interesting what they are doing. It's about Stadt-Land, so this is a little bit the main topic because it's a poorer country, Thüringen. There are a lot of places in the countryside where there are not so many people who want to live there, but beautiful industrial, and also we are, for example, next semester we are working on a valley, Schwarzer Tal, where there are amazing hotels, hostels and other places partly empty from a time where there was an industrial revolution in Thüringen and people wanted to spend some weeks in the summer in a nice area, and it's, you know, like this. And I think organizations such like IBA Thüringen, for example, could have this role because they are working, there are case studies and they are working intensively with certain cases in Thüringen, from Plattenbausiedlungen to this valley to the empty Eiermann building in Apolda, which used to be which is a beautiful industrial building from the 1920s with a sun terrace on the roof, empty. So, or for example, the Open Oproep in Flanders. This is a competition system in the Flemish part of Belgium, and they have a kind of system where they have open competitions where they closely work with governments from small cities. So it's very much related to the political system in Flanders. But I think this is maybe not, I think universities could cooperate, but we should also look for other forms of organizations or frameworks where this can happen. Yeah?
I would like to end this here. But we do have a break now, so you can maybe try to get your questions answered in a more private situation upstairs, where there's food now for us, finally. We meet back at 3 o'clock. Thank you very much for this panel. And see you all at 3.